What's up, Flaniverse? Yesterday, I made a short video on Underdog, how to play the Gauntlet contest on Underdog Playoff Best Ball, NFL Playoff Best Ball. And I had a couple people say, "Will I be doing?" Ask me if I'd be doing something similar for DraftKings, and I thought it's a good idea, especially because DraftKings has made some drastic improvements. I was just reading over some of my notes from a couple years ago when I did this same thing. Might have even been last year when I wrote up how to play playoff best ball on DraftKings or some of the differences between the sites. And I'd totally forgotten DraftKings a couple years ago was 20 rounds in playoff best ball, which is insane. Like you don't need 20 spots on your roster. Change the entire approach to how to play. Changed every. It was too long. It was too many rounds for playoff best ball. You don't need 20 rounds. So really nice to see DraftKings first of all, and it was also 100,000 to first at the time. Now we're up to $500,000 to first in these DraftKings playoff best ball contests, and they have moved it back to 12 rounds, which is perfect for the DraftKings structure because it's a little bit different from Underdog in that you have a tight ends bet. You have six starting players on your roster each week. So I want to make a short video on how to play DraftKings as well. If I have time, I'll also review some of my DraftKings drafts. I haven't done nearly as many of them, which now I'm kind of regretting because I think this is a really cool contest to play. But we'll see if I have some time. I'm going to make this its own playlist, the DraftKings playlist. So if you want to check out any videos I do on reviewing my teams, check that out there. I want to start here just showing you how to find the contests. There's probably a more elegant way to do this than how to do, but you just go to the DraftKings main page, click NFL, and the best way that I could find. Oh, here it is. Actually, I did not see this showing up previously. This makes it easier. Just clicking playoff best ball. I was searching best ball over here, but they do have this. I did not think this was popping up earlier. Okay, just click playoff best ball, and this is the contest that I'm going to be talking about here: the $2 million playoff special, which is 500,000 at first. It's a $20 entry. They've also got the Wildcat. Oh, it looks like a new Wildcat. They must have filled the original Wildcat. Another 333, 50,000 to first Wildcat. They've got some smaller contests as well. They've really done a good job in best ball recently, improving the product. So kudos to DraftKings. But I wanted to pull up this particular contest, and you can see the rules and scoring, all the contest details here. Cool thing here, you can just choose the different round to see what the payout is for that round. So the first round, you're just advancing to the second round. The top team out of six is going to advance. But you can check second round. What does everybody win, et cetera, round by round. So kind of cool that they have this page here. But you can see here 500,000 to first, 200,000 to second, 100,000 to third, and so on and so forth. It's another top heavy contest. But I made another Word document. Nothing exciting about this. Just going to go through my Word document. First of all, going over the structure of the contest, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategy involved in DraftKings playoff best ball because it is a little bit different. So some similarities again to regular season best ball, but also some pretty big differences. This one again, $2 million total prize pool, 500,000 to first. We'll go over the rules here, talk about the structure. So it starts with 19,584 drafts with six managers in each. You're drafting with five other people. So a total of six people drafting, and it's sequential. So whenever you enter, you're just grouped into the group of six people that enter around the same time as you. Once that fills, then it's the next six, and so on and so forth. So it's not random. It's sequential. It's just based on when you enter, and then once six managers have entered a draft, then you get 2 minutes on DraftKings, which feels like an eternity after a draft fills to wait for the draft to start. But you do get 2 minutes, which is nicer, I guess, in contests that fill slower. But then it's a 12-round draft on DraftKings because, again, you have six players in your starting lineup, six on the bench. So you kind of need it to be 12 if you want to play some of the bye week games in particular. If you want to play for a Chiefs Lions Super Bowl, important to have 12 instead of 10 so that you can fill a full roster for the Super Bowl that way. Each manager, again, going to draft 12 players. It's 12 rounds, and then you're done. There's no adding, dropping, trading, etc. Just like regular best ball, you're not setting your own lineup. Each week, your team is active. Your top scoring players, based generally on the same scoring as a standard PPR season-long league. There's also bonuses for 100 rushing and receiving yards. There's bonuses for 300 passing yards. A little bit of differences. Read the rules for some of this stuff, but it's generally the same scoring as standard PPR season-long leagues. And you accumulate points automatically within a roster of one quarterback, one running back, two receivers, one tight end. That's different from underdog. There is a tight end spot, and then one flex player, which then can be from any position other than the quarterback, just like regular fantasy football. Just like in regular season best ball, a majority of teams get eliminated each round. But in regular season best ball, the first round lasts all 14 weeks 1 through 14, whereas in playoff best ball, it's just 1 week per round. So there's the wild card weekend, divisional round, conference championship, and Super Bowl. The first round, which is wild card weekend, teams compete against the 5 other teams they drafted against. So you're just competing with the people you draft with, and just 1 out of 6 move on to the second round on DraftKings. Another difference from the gauntlet, at least on underdog. There are different contests have different rules, but in this contest, just 1 out of 6 moves on to the second round. You do make money if you advance on DraftKings. If you get your one team through, you turn $20 into $30. So it's something. I still would not play for just advancing. I see a ton of teams making the mistake of playing for advancing, and I think it's a big mistake even on DraftKings. For the second round, advancing teams are randomly assigned to a new pod of 6 teams for the divisional round, and only the top team moves on. Same thing for the third round. It's another 6-person pod. Top team moves on to the final round, which is Super Bowl round. It pits all 544 remaining teams against each other in one large tournament, where the top team wins $500,000 on DraftKings. The bottom, every team outside of the top 250 wins just $500. So, man, 100x there for getting first rather than bottom 200 some teams in the final. So again, very, very top heavy tournament here. And it's great to turn $20 into $500, but the real money isn't just making it to the final. We went over the structure earlier. It's 500,000 to first. It's 200,000 or something to second. I forget what the numbers are exactly, but it is the 500 first, 200 second, 100,000 to third, so on and so forth. There's a lot more money if you can get to the top of the Super Bowl round. So that's really what you want to play for in these contests, is playing for the Super Bowl round. So generally, best strategy is to work backwards from the Super Bowl. You want to draft a team that has at least the possibility of 6 or more active players in the Super Bowl, and that's within the structure of quarterback, running back, 2 receivers, tight end, and flex. You don't just want 6 receivers or something, because that you can only fill 3 spots with receivers. So it needs to be within that structure, but you want to draft a team that can field a full roster of 6 players for the Super Bowl. And you can do that with just one team. If you want to draft 6 Bills players, a lot of people are probably drafting 6 Bills players. That's one that is possible to do. You can do that, and if it makes it to the Super Bowl, you're probably going to win more than the minimum prize, most likely in the final round. But generally, I think it's a better idea to have some players from the opposing conference. Also, pretty unlikely that the 6 highest scoring players in the Super Bowl are all going to come from the same team. So I think it's generally a better idea to have a combo that includes both an AFC team and an NFC team for the Super Bowl. But again, you can do it with just one conference. It's better than not having 6 full players. And you might even be able to draft for multiple different Super Bowl scenarios. So the example I give here is you could have 4 players from one AFC team and then 4 players from 2 different NFC teams, where they both, fit the puzzle together, where you can fit multiple different Super Bowl scenarios. And that's kind of one approach that I like to take a lot, is having, one kind of primary team with the quarterback, ideally with the running back also, but not always, and then having two teams from the opposing conference that kind of fit the puzzle together. So if it goes, there are a couple different ways where it can go, where you just rely on one team. You need to make it the team where you have the quarterback, and then 2 teams that could make it, and you'd still, if you make it to the Super Bowl, be able to field a live roster. I think that's generally my favorite approach. Doesn't always work out, depends on the room. Sometimes you have to adjust. Chiefs and Lions currently have the likeliest odds of making the Super Bowl. They also have the first round buys, meaning any Chiefs or Lions that you draft are going to be zeros in the first round, which easier to overcome that on underdog or in other contests where you have multiple teams advancing for the first round. It is admittedly, it's a struggle in this contest where you only one team out of 6 advances from each pod. So you need to be kind of cognizant of the rest of the players on your team if you are drafting for a Chiefs or Lions Super Bowl, and especially if you draft for a Chiefs and Lions Super Bowl. If that's the scenario that you're playing for, you're probably going to have to draft. I mean, you can only really draft a maximum of 6 players from Chiefs plus Lions. Most likely, it'll be difficult to advance in a pot of 6 if you only have 5 active players in the first round. It's possible, but it'll be difficult. So generally, if I'm drafting for a Chiefs Lions Super Bowl, I'm going to draft exactly 6 Chiefs and Lions that fit within the construction that can all score points, and then 6 players from other teams, and they need to be players that have pretty high upside in round 1 that can get you to advance through to round 2. It is the one scenario where you might be okay just drafting 4 or 5 from the Chiefs or Lions, because it's going to be really tough for people to advance 6 teams all the way to the Super Bowl, 6 players all the way to the Super Bowl from the Chiefs and Lions. I still think it's generally a better idea to have at least 5, I would say. But generally, I'm trying to draft 6 if I'm playing for a Chiefs Lions Super Bowl. I would generally avoid players that will be playing against each other in the first round. For example, Commanders and Buccaneers playing each other in the first round. I would usually avoid drafting players from both on the same team, as you'll be better off if you're at full strength in the second round. It's impossible to advance players from both. I am a bit looser with this rule on DraftKings because you need because only one team advances, and like that game could go off. The Commanders Bucks game could just be a really high scoring game. I'm just using that as an example, but it's possible that that game goes off. So having like Mike Evans plus Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin from that game, I don't think that's the end of the world. You know you're going to lose at least 1, maybe 2 players from that game, but you also know that the other team, those players are going to advance to the second round, and it's tougher on DraftKings. So I do think I played a little bit looser with that rule of not playing players against each other in the first round. Still would prefer not to, but you need to advance. It's tough to advance in a room where only one gets there. So I do loosen that rule up a little bit more on DraftKings. With that said, no need to dominate in round 1. 1 of 6 teams advances. So 1 in 6, it's tough, but it's also not like impossible. And you just need to sneak by. Keep in mind that you are the only team in your draft room with the players on your team. So, for example, if you draft Josh Allen and Josh Allen scores 50 points, nobody else can get those 50 points from Josh Allen. So, even though only one team can advance, it's still like if you have the 1 or 2 players that go absolutely nuts in round 1, then you're probably you have a pretty big leg up because nobody else has those players. So you don't really need your entire team to go off necessarily, as long as somebody else doesn't have like 3 players scoring 35 each. One player can give you a huge advantage if it is the one player that separates from the others at his position. Try not to get sucked into drafting multiple players from a team you think doesn't really have a real shot at making it to the conference championship round. I guess the best example I would give there is like I wouldn't want to draft 3 Broncos in most scenarios, or the teams that just don't have great odds. And I guess I didn't pull it up in this one. I did in my previous video. You can search Super Bowl odds, playoff odds. They're all over the internet. There's free resources you can find on like Spike Week has a grid of teams, like the matchups that are most likely in the Super Bowl. Really good resource. Good idea to look at like which teams are most likely to make it to the Super Bowl, which Super Bowl combos are the most likely, even like which conference championship combos are the most likely. All of that is really, really good information to have. I don't have that in front of me right now. If you check out the video I did for Underdog, you can find some of that info there. But yeah, Spike Week has a good chart. There are plenty of good resources to give you an idea of the odds of certain teams making it to the Super Bowl. I believe the Broncos are the lowest or one of the lowest. I mean, the Texans are pretty low on that list also. So like the Texans are actually a better example because Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, both like really, really appealing for round 1, just really good fantasy producers. And I will draft them as one-offs, but I'm probably not going with more than 2 Texans on a team. Like it's just unlikely they advance past round 2. The AFC is so tough. So just kind of keep in mind the odds of the teams you draft to make it to at least the conference championship or the Super Bowl. You always have to be agile in basically any form of best ball. You need to adjust to what the room gives you. Unfortunately, we can't always draft every player we want. So you might go into draft thinking, I think it's going to be a Ravens Eagles Super Bowl. That is what I want to draft for. But if you have the 6th pick and by the time it gets to you, both Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson are already gone, do you really want to draft a team without Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson? If you think that's going to be the Super Bowl, I would just adjust to a different Super Bowl scenario in that case. I'm not going to go draft the backup quarterback in these contests and still try to force my way to a Ravens Eagles Super Bowl. I'd rather just make a bet on a different team making it to the Super Bowl. So always adjust to what the room is giving you. And of course, pay attention to your allocation of skill at each position. You can only get scores from 2 running backs or 1 quarterback at most. You probably shouldn't draft both Hurts and Jackson with your first 2 picks. I also see sometimes people making the mistake of like, they draft a Lamar team and it's a good idea. You usually can't get Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson. So it's a good idea then to take a late Justice Hill, for example, to have a running back on your Ravens team for the Super Bowl stack. But I do see people make the mistake sometimes of not taking any player, any running back that's going to project for more than like 5 fantasy points in the first round. And you're pretty unlikely to make it through all the way to the Super Bowl if your running backs are Justice Hill and Kenneth Gainwell, for example, like for the scenario where you're playing for the Eagles Ravens. So you always need to like keep in mind, okay, I need players at each position that can score me points every round to get to the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl is in some ways the easiest because you're not going to need that many points most likely from every position. If you just have 6 active players in the Super Bowl, you're probably going to do pretty well. Obviously, the better they project, the better. But the earlier rounds, you should really make sure that you have players that are going to project well at each position for each round. Maybe tight end you can sacrifice to some extent if the room kind of forces you to sacrifice it. But in general, like there are going to be people getting 25 fantasy points from their running back in round 1. So if your running back room only provides a projection of 4 or 5 fantasy points, you're probably dead in that room. I would not draft that way. So make sure you are drafting some players that can get you through for each round. So that's it. It is a fairly simple game. It's still really tough to win. There's, I think, 117,000 people or teams in this contest. So it is pretty tough. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask in the comments below this video. You can always DM me. I'm at PlayerQDFS on the socials. I'll probably do some more team reviews for both DraftKings and Underdog. So those are going to be 2 different playlists on my channel. So you can check those out, kind of see my thought process for different drafts, discuss how the drafts went. I'd also recommend joining the Flannelverse Discord. Really good group of people. We have reactivated the talk of team review. So if you want to have your own playoff best ball teams reviewed, there's a channel for that in the Flannelverse Discord. The link is in the description of this video to the Flannelverse Discord. So check that out if you're not already in there. We love talking some playoff best ball. All right, that is going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and if you didn't, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. All right, thanks guys.